Shalom, peace and blessings. Welcome to the Fourth Angels Learning Center. Today, we are continuing our spiritual warfare series, specifically on the armor of Yah. Today, we are on the helmet of salvation, and I want to be very specific as to what this helmet is and how our minds needs to be focused on, specifically, practically, on preparing or putting on this particular protection in our thoughts. Now we did talk about girding the loins of truth, and we talked about how all these elements is actually in your mind. We talked about the breastplate protecting the heart, which is referring to the aspect of the desires that's in your mind, or the affection or love towards the truth. We talked about the feet being shod, which is the preparation, having your mind having a readiness to move and to go and to walk this out in delivering the word. And then we talked about the shield of faith and what that means to us, and how the Father consumes that element of being a shield and covering us even in our blind spots and our weak spots and the spots that are that we are ignorant of. But now we're going into verse 17, which talks about the helmet of salvation. So let me pull this verse up before we start talking about it. So Ephesians chapter 6, looking at verse 17, and it says, and take the helmet of salvation. I'm not going to go through the other ones because I'm going to do a different video for the rest of this verse, but it says here that take the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of Elohim. Now, many people don't realize, because they use this word so much, they don't realize what salvation specifically means. Salvation means deliverance. It means deliverance. It means to be rescued from. Let's take a look at this. See if the Greek word, it matches the Hebrew word. The Hebrew word is yasha for salvation or saving, or yasha or yahusha for salvation. This one is soterion, which means let's see if it has it. It says bringing salvation, saving someone. And the word for salvation means, it's not saying it here, but deliverance. So it derives from the word that means safety, deliver, rescue, salvation. So this is what it means to have a helmet of salvation. Clearly, this one many people can understand. It's talking about the overall condition of your mind, the overall understanding of your mind. Your mind has to be fixed in understanding salvation, not necessarily understanding, but applying the salvation. Again, I'm going to reiterate one of the major important points that we made was that Yah is telling us to put these elements on. So he's telling us to put on this element of a mind that is focused or centered around deliverance, and not the deliverance of others, because you have to put it on yourself, meaning that it has to be on you. You have to allow him to establish you before you can go and give it out to other people. So what does it mean by having a mind fixed or established in deliverance or salvation? Well, what was we delivered from? Let's look at a few verses pertaining to the helmet, and then let's talk about what we were free from. Let's go to Isaiah 59. Isaiah 59, verse 17, it says here, for he put on the righteousness as a breastplate and a helmet of salvation upon his head, and he put on the garments of vengeance of clothing, and was clad with zeal of a cloak. So again, they have this element of a helmet of salvation on their head in regards to where their mind needs to be, in regards to their walk, their righteousness. Let's go to Psalms 140. Psalms 140, looking at verse 7 and 8. It says, O Elohim, Yahuah, the strength of my salvation. You have covered my head in the day of battle. Grant not, O Yahuah, the desires of the wicked. Further not his wicked device, lest they exalt themselves. So for the mind to be covered by Yah in battle, for the mind to be protected from the desires of the wicked and also the wicked devices. I know this may be talking about physical battle in some instances, but David spoke about this struggle with his mind, with his insecurities, with his fears throughout the book of Psalms. So I definitely believe we can apply this salvation and this protection, this battle, with the same thing that we're talking about in Ephesians. You wrestle not against flesh and blood, right? So the desires of the wicked devices, our mind needs to be fixed on salvation. So let's look at what we were saved from. David understands one aspect of salvation. He points this out in Psalms chapter 51. And he says here, he says, wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. For I acknowledge my transgressions, and my sin is always before me. Against you and you only have I sinned and done this evil in your sight, that you might be justified when you speak and be clear when you judge. It says, behold, I was shaped in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. He says, you desire truth in the inward parts, and in the hidden part shall you shall make me to know wisdom. Purge me. So you see, his experience is all the things that he's made up of, all the things that he is being taken out, is being removed. All the things that's hindering David is being removed so that way Yah can fill him with wisdom. It says, purge me with hyssop and I shall be clean. Wash me and I shall be whiter than snow. Make me to hear joy and gladness, and the bones which you have broken may rejoice. Hide your face from my sins. Blot out all my iniquities. This is what we're rescued from. This is what we're delivered from. This is what our salvation, this is what we receive salvation from. It says, create in me a clean heart, O Elohim, and renew a right spirit within me. Let me show you how deep this problem actually goes. Let's go to Romans chapter 6, verse 13. It says, do not yield your members as instruments of unrighteousness unto sin, but yield yourselves unto Elohim as those that are alive from the dead, and your body as instruments of righteousness unto Elohim. Verse 16, do you not know that whoever you yield or surrender yourselves as servants to obey, you will become that person's servant to obey, whether it's sin unto death or of obedience unto righteousness. So again, you are going to become a slave to sin if you yield to sin. If you yield to sin, you will become a slave to sin. So what does he do? He rescues you from sin. Verse 22. But now being made free from sin and become servants to Elohim, you have your fruit unto holiness and the end everlasting life. Let's go to the next chapter. Talks a little bit about this. Look what he says here. I delight in the law of Elohim after the inward man. What does verse 23 say? But I see another law in my members warring against the law of my mind. You see that? Helmet of salvation. But there's a law in my body warring against the law of my mind, and major thing, bringing me into captivity, enslaving my mind. It's not only warring against your mind, it's not only causing you to struggle, it's holding your mind captive. It's your mind is prisoner to the law that's in your flesh, to the law of sin, which is in my members. Then it says, oh, wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me or save me from the body of this death? And of course, it's Yahushua. But we're talking about the problem. We already know the solution. But we're talking about the problem and where to keep the mind on. You have to constantly focus on what you were saved from so you don't revert back to the things that held you captive. Do not go back to the things that hold you captive when you are saved from it. So acknowledge what things are holding you captive, as David did. What are your habits? What is your character? What is your addictions? All of those things has to be laid down at Yahushua's feet so you can constantly recognize you was delivered from something horrible. Romans 8 tells us a little bit more about this captivity. It says here, to be carnally minded, Romans 8:6, to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Why? Because the carnal mind is enmity against Elohim. It is not subject to the law of Elohim, and it cannot be. It says, indeed, neither indeed can be, meaning that it cannot be subject to Yah's law. The carnal mind is trapped. The carnal mind is trapped. It says, so then they that are of the flesh cannot please Elohim. Very important for understand why our mind is fixed on us being rescued. It's solidified on the rescuing of our souls from sin. Why? Because the more that you realize how much you was saved from is the more that you will remember to serve him, is the more that you will remember you do not want to go back down that route. There was a question that Messiah gave to Peter, and he said to Peter, he said, who's gonna love the master more, the one that was forgiven a little bit or the one that was forgiven the most? Peter said, the one that's forgiven more will love him more. And he didn't go more into detail on it, but the encompassing idea was, what type of forgiveness do you think you obtained? What kind of salvation did you obtain from Messiah? What kind of salvation you obtained from Yah? Do you look at yourself like that you was forgiven more? He gives us these different ideas on how you ought to think about your own salvation, to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. What about the plank in your eye and the speck in your brother's eye? It doesn't mean that the issue that your brother has is not causing him death. It means that your issue should be the most important issue. Your issue should be the worst issue. Your sins should be the worst sins. What's keeping you out of the kingdom should be the worst situation ever that you need to deal with, that you need to go to Yah and say, Father, save me. The mind has to be solidified in your rescue, in what saved you, in what you was saved from, in order for your mind to be constantly protected from all of these things. For us to constantly know what we were saved from, we can't possibly go back. I can't possibly fathom living that way, that going back to that captive mindset that I once had. I know what I was saved from. I know what I have victory from, what I was delivered from. Nothing can change the fact that Yah sent his son to deliver me from these wicked things that was established in me, that was holding me captive. So praise Yah for his helmet of salvation. He covers us from these wicked devices, from these wicked attacks and these wicked plans that the enemy tries to trick us on. So please keep your mind focused on your deliverance. Don't get insecure. Yeah, I didn't deliver you or rescue you from sin or from captivity or from bondage or from being a mental prisoner to bring you into a place of insecurity and depression. It's just more, the attack of the enemy is you're allowing the attack of the enemy to be your helmet rather than allowing Yah's rescue, his deliverance to fill your thoughts. So I hope that this was encouraging. Look forward to the next study. Shalom, everyone.